This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
For right now, we're sitting down to do Chapter 15, Kinslayer, and our symbol is the heron marked sword.
Twice and twice shall he be marked.
And in this chapter is the first of the four.
The first of the, I suppose, yes, you could say the first of the four marks.
Yeah.
So he gets the two herons and the two dragons.
Eventually.
In this one, he gets the first of the herons.
On his right hand?
Yes.
I think.
It's on his right hand. He's right-handed. And in this scene, he's wielding the sword normally. When he gets the second heron, which is during the final battle against Ishmael, he actually is using a reverse grip in his offhand. So that's why he gets it branded on the left.
Oh. Never noticed that.
I may
Just
have...
the reverse grip.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
Because it's the same heron, but what happens is he flips it, rotates the sword 180 degrees and then flips it 180 degrees. And that's how you have the same heron branding both hands.
You know, I went to this Western martial arts fencing group for a while. Back when it was called ARMA. I think ARMA since has broken up into some splinter groups, but whatever. And there was a guard called tail guard, where the point of the blade is facing away from the opponent, like behind you. So if you're squared off with your opponent, apparently a tail guard is a thing for training horses or something, so that's not working as far as a Google search. But it's, the sword is facing back.
Mm-hmm.
Just made me think of that.
Enigma says a reverse low guard in Italian fencing.
That sounds right, yeah. Italian fencing is a big part of the kind of Western martial arts. I'll break into this, as I say. I say that at the beginning of like every episode. The way the strangely faded distant hills seemed to slide toward Rand when he looked straight at them made his head spin, unless he wrapped himself in the void. Sometimes the emptiness crept up on him unawares, but he avoided it like death. Better to be dizzy than share the void with that uneasy light. Better by far to stare at the faded land. Still, he tried not to look at anything too far away, unless it lay right ahead of them. Huron wore a fixed look as he concentrated on sniffing the trail, as if he were trying to ignore the land the trail crossed. When the sniffer did notice what lay around them, he would give a start and wipe his hands on his coat, then push his nose forward like a hound, eyes glazing, excluding everything else. Loial rode slumped in his saddle and frowned as he glanced around, ears twitching uneasily, muttering to himself.
So this is all them reacting to time and distance, not fully acting normal.
Yeah, we see, I thought that demonstrated really well the unease, general sense of unease that everyone has.
And that's definitely accented by the fact that there is no noise, no life, no movement. This is a dead world.
Yeah, and we see a description of the landscape after that, of which I just highlighted a little bit because we've talked about it so much before.
Mm-hmm.
The burn scars that are like stripes across the earth is very curious. Sometimes a mile wide, sometimes only a few hundred paces. All ran east and west, tapered to points at the ends.
And a little bit later, there's a description of the burns on Ishmael's face, on Baalzamon's face.
Yeah.
And that description is, he was horribly burned, yet between the black-edged red crevices crossing those features, the skin looked healthy and smooth. And I have to see a parallel between the striped burns across the land and the striped burns across Ishmael's face.
That does seem like an odd reflection, which is kind of funny because we're in a mirror world. I'm using air quotes with my fingers.
Right.
And if this is sort of like a mirror of Ishmael's face. But I don't know if I'm just pulling that together out of nowhere, if that's meant to be part of it.
It's been in my head for a long time. It's one of those things where I always thought that those two were somehow related, but on this reread, I can't seem to find a good amount of evidence for it. But just notice that there are similar descriptions. That sort of streaking burn marks. It just seems, being both in the same chapter and having a really similar description of streaked burn marks, it's hard for me not to see a parallel there, even though I can't in any way relate them.
Nothing grew where the burns were, green to black, along knife-edge thin lines. The water was okay to drink, but it tasted flat, as if it had been boiled.
I just imagine that's, there's no oxygen in the water. There's no life in the water.
I looked around on the internet a bunch this afternoon, and when I was reading this chapter a couple weeks ago, and people have all different sorts of ideas. Also, in a bit, we see the lines in the sky.
Mm-hmm. They look a lot like contrails.
Yeah.
Twice he saw a wispy streak crawling across the sky, like a line drawn with cloud. The lines were too straight to be natural, it seemed, but he could not imagine what might make them. And so I don't think they can be satellites, because the satellites would be higher. They would make the contrails.
Yeah.
Planes of some sort.
People have suggested planes, or because this is a mirror world, maybe technology was different and there's some flying objects, or objects descending from space and making lines as they burn up.
I thought like laser orbital bombardment was an interesting theory.
Could be. It's just wide speculation.
Yeah. Oh, genetically engineered rockin'? Making contrails? Probably not.
One decent sounding one that I saw online was like the shadow is winning the battle against the light, and the light or the dark's final stroke was to just wipe out everything. And so these lines are, who knows?
I'm nodding.
Yeah. Power from a powerful Tel'aran'rhiod or whatever.
I mean, we're literally in a world where anything is possible and we don't get a lot of details. So we can speculate pretty widely about what's going on. But as far as I can tell, there's no answers as to what caused the desolation of the land. Whether it was power related or whether it was technology related. The one thing we do know about this world is it seems to be fairly parallel to our world up until the point where Arthur Hawkwing won the Trolloc War.
Right.
I think we see that later. That's not in this chapter, is it? Where they run across the monument?
No, I think it's in the next chapter where they're in the mirror worlds.
And they come across this monument where they expected to see the monument to Arthur Hawkwing's victory, but instead it's a monument to the Trolloc victory.
But a monument of the same battle.
Right.
Presumably.
So
where Arthur Hawkwing did not win in this world.
As far as we can tell, up to that point, the worlds were the same.
Right. And otherwise the landscape wouldn't look the same, like if the breaking had never happened or whatever.
Right. The world would have had to break in the same way.
Yeah.
Next thing I have is Loial tree singing.
Yeah. When they had ridden half the morning, Loial abruptly swung down from his huge horse without a word and strode to a stand of giant's broom. Rand pulls up his horse and stops, but he doesn't ask. He just watches Loial. Something about the Ogier's manner, as if he himself were uncertain, kept Rand silent. After staring at the tree, Loial put his hands on a trunk and began to sing in a deep, soft rumble. It seemed pure song, music, without words, at least none that Rand could make out. If there were words, they faded into the music, just as water pours into a stream. Heron gasped and stared. And there's a long description here. I don't know how much we should get into. But one thing I found interesting is that Rand, I think once, maybe twice, has a sort of vague recognition.
Mm-hmm. It seems so familiar, that song, as if he should know it.
Yes, that was one of the things.
I also noticed that the words don't seem very important to the song.
Yeah, and the way Loial sings it, there are no words. And we've speculated about this before, but we think that tree singing is much more like the song itself doesn't matter so much as the connection to the life.
Correct. Yeah. Because, we see Rand do it with some bawdy tavern song.
Yeah, I think that's the exact description.
Bawdy might not be the right word, but, just a tavern, like a jingle, He just has to sing something. And it does seem to be the talent of tree singing allows him to create the growth.
And we think Rand has it.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the Aiel do even. They just don't know.
They don't sing.
Right. None of the men sing.
I did notice that here, Rand had heard Ogier tree singing once when Loial had sung a dying tree and brought it back to life. That was, of course, the Green Man's tree.
Yeah.
And he'd heard of sung wood, objects wrought from trees by the tree song. The talent was fading. Talent, capital T. So just when we recently talked about talents, and this is definitely a talent with a capital T, is tree singing.
I included talent in the tree singing episode, especially since by the end of the series, we know that humans can do it.
You include tree singing in the talent episode?
Or talent in the tree singing episode?
Yeah, you said tree singing.
Is that what I said?
Yeah. Reverse those two. But yeah, it's definitely capital T talent. And it seems, as far as I can tell, the only talent that we ever see Ogier have.
Yeah. I think the rest are just physical attributes.
And patience.
Or, yeah, what makes them seem special. Long life and skin like tree bark.
Oh, and
yeah.
Feelings of heron. That's right.
Thanks, Radia.
And we did speculate that was something that all Ogier could do.
Possibly.
We think.
Yeah. In his hands, Loial held a staff as tall as he was, and as thick as Rand's forearm, smooth and polished. Where the trunk had been on the giant's broom was a small stem of new growth.
He never uses this one. He throws it away as soon as they start getting chased. I was a little disappointed that I never get to see Loial tree sing the staff, use it.
Who knows? Maybe Jordan wanted the build up. I wanted to see Ogier in combat for so long. It only takes 10 books or something.
Yeah. Well, and because Loial never talks about himself being in combat.
No, I don't. Do we see? I think we see it in the Two Rivers for the first time. Is that right?
He definitely takes out some Trollocs to defend children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sneed.
But and there's one time in the stone, I think, where he's defending women and children. But he tells the story about it. We don't actually That's why I think the Shanshan gardeners are very impressive, because that's really the first time we see badass Ogier.
Oh yeah, I have talked about this while recording before, but there's this piece of fan art that I just want to use so bad on Instagram or something. There's a Shanshan soldier standing next to an Ogier gardener.
Soon.
Yeah, soon.
And then we see, of course, Elder Haman and Loial's mother and Aerith all fight when they're attacked. They pull down the shears and the long-handled.
Yeah, they have these old weapons
axes
that come from somewhere.
They're hanging on the wall as decorative pieces, and when they're attacked by Trollocs, they pull them down and distribute them.
I imagine they were used once.
Oh yeah, pruning knives. The women use pruning knives, and the men use long-handled wood axes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I imagine Ogier pruning shears are like a sword, a human sword, more or less.
I imagine they could prune your head right off.
Yeah. That's what the way I figure it. Or isn't it half a pruning shear or something like that?
Well, and they definitely put a long handle on them. So yeah, I imagine they're more like spears really than pruning shears.
Makes sense.
But I always imagine them as two handles that you cut, scissors, basically, really big scissors.
That's the way I envisioned it. I can't really remember the description from the books, but I always imagined it was, like a giant pair of scissors that you broke in half, piece from piece. So you have this circle and a huge blade I have no idea if that's accurate or not, but that's the way I imagined it.
Do you think they separate them and use each side of the scissors as an individual blade with a long handle?
Half and half. That's the way I saw it. I don't know if that's accurate.
Because pruning, when I picture pruning shears, it's something that you squeeze and it clips a branch. It's not.
Yeah, it's just a little blade with a long handle, I guess. So
right. So that just feels like a spear to me. Nuke Juice is saying they were ahead of their time with the removable bolt in the middle. So it was basically two pairs of scissors, a pair of scissors where you take the hinge out, and then you have daggers, or if you put a long handle on them, spears. Put a long handle on a wood axe, and you've got a war axe.
Yeah, I noticed Loial uses that as an expression when he says, Elder Haman would have said I was putting a long handle on my axe, which is a kind of an Ogier expression for jumping to conclusions or
getting angry,
not thinking things through.
I really like the way that Ogier take their plant working tools and turn them into weapons.
Yeah, I mean...
And the way he, I think Loial, when he's fighting, thinks about Trollocs being unnatural and pruning them and cutting them back. Sometimes you've got to pull a plant up by the roots to make the whole garden grow. Ogier know that.
A quarterstaff, Rand said, surprised. I didn't know Ogier carried weapons, Loial. Usually, we do not. The Ogier replied almost curtly. Usually. The price has always been too high. He hefted the huge quarterstaff and wrinkled his broad nose with distaste. Elder Hammond would surely say I am putting a long handle on my axe, but I am not just being hasty or rash, Rand. This place, he shivered, and his ears twitched.
When you think the price is too high, do you think it's just that doing violence isn't worth it, or do you think it has to do with tree singing? And the price to the tree is too high?
Oh, I assumed it had something more to do with the price of doing violence is too high. I'm not exactly sure what he might mean.
It feels very Way of the Leaf to me.
Yeah.
Where they talk about the person who does violence to themselves.
Right.
And that to me seems to be what the Ogier is referencing there.
You, ruin a part of your mind. I think that makes a lot more sense.
And then just the Ogier being a relatively peaceful folk.
Yeah. Ogier have a long memory, so who knows what they're referring to. It could be from... I'm sure they, if not remember, they remember stories of, in Ogier's grandpa was alive, during the breaking.
And Loial references that when he says, when they're talking about retreating from the last battle by using the Book of Translation, he says, did we retreat during the Trolloc Wars? Did we retreat during the 100 Years? No, we were out there and fighting because we fight the shadow. Because if the shadow wins, we lose no matter where we are.
Yeah, the shadow wins here, the shadow wins everywhere.
Exactly. So let's make a line. Let's put a line in the sand and stand and fight.
Can't wait to get to that. Stick with it, guys. 3, 4, 5 years.
I mean, we're coming up on a year of doing this, aren't we?
Yeah.
When did we start?
I'm tempted to check Libsyn. I really honestly can't remember how long we've been doing this.
Basically 5/1. May. So...
coming around. That means we've been doing it for 3/4 of a year.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, we should be done with 2 books in a year.
Oh, yeah.
So we're almost halfway through The Great Hunt, and I can't really say we're accelerating, but we have accelerated. We're doing. We started off doing 1 episode a week.
Sure, we did that for a short period of time.
Now we're doing
2.
At least 2. Plus, right now we're also putting time into the special lore episodes.
Yeah, and the occasional interview with Jason Denzel.
Yeah.
So we have no shortage of ideas of things we want to talk about. That's for sure.
There's no shortage of subject matter.
No, yeah. There's a few pages we can pull from. And so this land is clearly a land of violence. It's glad that Loial makes the staff. It's glad for a weapon to be made. It's pro-violence, pro-weapons.
Rand, this land was glad for a weapon to be made. Glad! The light shine on us, Huron murmured nervously, and the Creator's hand shelter us. Though we go to the last embrace of the Mother, the light illumine our way. He kept repeating the catechism as if it had a charm to protect him.
You say the light...
Illumine? Illumine? Illumine?
Not illumine.
Illumine?
Illumine. Yeah.
Is that definitely wrong? I don't know where I got that from. Yep, nope. There's only one way to pronounce that, and I was wrong. Just looked.
I think I've heard you say that a few times, and I just figured I'd stop you this time and be like, I think that's wrong.
It's one of those things.
Yeah. That's what happens when you read a book as opposed to...
And then don't talk to anyone about it for 10 years.
Light illumine you. And so I know Rand's sort of trying to take the lead here. He's being encouraging. He's trying to be positive, and really for the first time stepping up as a leader.
Yeah. You see that a bit in the last chapter too. This is really the beginning of his leadership qualities.
The next thing I have is Huron talking about the smell and the fact that he's sort of remembering it.
Me too. It's like I'm remembering it, Lord Rand, instead of smelling it. But I'm not. There's dozens of trails crossing it all the time. Dozens and dozens. And all sorts of smells of violence. Some of them fresh, almost. Only washed out, like everything else.
And so we know what he's smelling is violence in the future, or their trail in the future.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. We know this is a mirror world. It could be the past as well, because he can smell Fane.
He can, but what we're able to realize is because they're traveling so much faster and because time and distance work differently in the portal world, they very quickly move ahead of Fane. Right? That's how, because when they exit the portal world, they are days ahead of them. And they've been tracking their trail the whole time. So he's not smelling the trail where it was. He's smelling where the trail will be. And so this thing where he's talking about, I remember it, but I don't remember it. What it is, instead of having a memory of the past, he's having a memory of the future. The smell is this memory of violence to come.
Do you think he could be smelling the battle with the Shaido? I'm trying to think of what would be in this area. I guess that's too far south.
No, I think he's smelling Fane and all the violence of the Dark Friends.
Oh, when he talks about the dozens and dozens, I guess the Trollocs and Dark Friends.
Oh, the crisscrossing trails? The crisscrossing trails, I think, are just all the various violent things that will happen in Randland. I think he's smelling future violence.
So are they in the Kinslayer's Dagger region now, right? They crossed the first river, but not the second, on the way south to Karaethon. Yeah, I was just curious about because there is some huge battles that happen in that sort of general area soon, but not that soon, months.
He could also be smelling possible violence.
That's a good point.
Possible future.
Considering they're in a possible future land.
Exactly. For me, the whole concept of smelling the trail is because they're smelling where the trail will be in the future. And the reason why, here's a sentence. But by nightfall, there was still no sign of the Dark Friends, and Heron said the trail was fainter still. The sniffer kept muttering to himself about remembering. And so as they travel, they're getting further and further ahead of Fane and his party, and the trail gets fainter and fainter and fainter because they're moving further and further away. Fane won't be there until later and later and later.
So they've possibly they're overtaking Fane, and the further ahead they get, the fainter the smell is.
Exactly.
I did not notice that. That's interesting.
And that's how the whole... Because, when he comes out of the portal stone at the other end, they've crossed hundreds and hundreds of miles in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And so they are moving much faster than they would be in the overworld, not in the portal stone. Because all the time they spend in Karaethon waiting for Ingtar, Ingtar is moving as fast as he can, and they get there like weeks ahead of time or days ahead of time. And they're going along Fane's path. They probably already passed him at this point. I'm sure
that's
within
what I'm
one
thinking.
day, because they were really close the whole time. So yeah, I think the faint smell and the remembering is entirely remembering the future. Normally he smells violence in the past. In the portal world, he's smelling violence in the future.
Right. It's never over, Althor. It's the next thing I have highlighted, even though it's not super relevant.
It's just Rand's
memory.
Yeah,
Rand's
he's thinking about Fane's Trollocs, Fane's Dark Friends. He knows that something weird is going on.
He's just kind of meditating on it while he makes camp.
Yeah.
In the half-dark of twilight, he worked the forms with his sword, the way Land had taught, though without the void.
Just a couple. I always enjoy the sword forms. Parting the silk, hummingbird kisses the honey rose, heron waiting in the rushes. I always thought, so parting the silk, right? I imagine that to be like a vertical overhand, like downward. If someone throws a sheet of silk up in the air, it's like this overhand downward cut that splits it in half, and that's parting the silk.
I always really liked that the sword forms are open to interpretation, and that you just get this phrase like hummingbird kisses the honey rose, and you're just left to imagine what that might be.
A jab, just a very quick jab that if it's unguarded, you're just going to stab him really shallowly in the throat.
That makes sense. Yeah. I also kind of appreciated in this passage here where Rand thinks, I suppose you would say, heron waiting in the rushes for balance. losing himself in swift, sure movements, forgetting for a time where he was. And he worked until sweat covered him. And I kind of like this because, in all martial traditions, there ends up being like a martial art created. And by martial art, I mean a thing, this is not entirely appropriate, but a thing like yoga or in the Asian martial arts, you see this existing now a lot more, where you see forms that someone works over and over and over. And what it really is, I mean, it reflects actual combat, but what it really is a workout. Mm-hmm. You do this over and over, and you're bound to be a better warrior because you're in better shape.
Always reminds me of Karate Kid.
Yeah, paint the fence.
Yeah, paint the fence. Wax on, wax off. You know, and he makes him repeat these motions hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of times, and then they become a natural response to being attacked. Is that sweep up, sweep down, circle left, circle. I think that's one of the greatest scenes in Karate Kid when he comes up to him and says, "You're wasting my time. You're making me do all these chores. You've taught me absolutely nothing about karate." And then the guy attacks him and says,
paint the fence.
Paint the fence. So, and he blocks every single one. He's like, yeah, you just learned how to block a bunch of attacks. That's what I've been having you do, And that to me is absolutely key. And just watching a Rand repeat the same motions over and over and over again, repeat the same, you don't have to think about it. Your muscles absolutely.
Sure. We see that when Lan approaches Rand when he's leaving Shinar and says, "I have to teach you about sheathing the sword." And Rand is like, "Yeah, you've had me do that like thousands of times. I think I can do it."
Take the sword out, put it back in. Take the sword out, put it back in. Okay, I'm not going to cut myself. He's like, no. This sheathing sword will cut you.
Rand took the first watch for himself, walking the edges of the copse with his bow, sometimes easing his sword in its scabbard. So Rand's kind of sitting around for a long time in the dark while the other two sleep.
Yeah, he starts to play his flute, but it's kind of weirdly quiet, so he puts it away. And he holds watch for a long time, and then he falls asleep. Doesn't say he falls asleep, but he held watch long into the night, letting the others sleep. He did not know how late it was when he suddenly realized a fog had risen. Yeah, you're asleep, buddy.
Close to the ground it lay, thick, making Heron and Loial indistinct mounds, seeming to hump out of clouds. Thinner, higher up, it still shrouded the land around them, hiding everything except the nearest trees. The moon seemed viewed through watered silk. Anything at all could come right up to them unseen. He touched his sword. "Swords do no good against me, Luce Theron. You should know that." The fog swirled around Rand's feet as he spun, the sword coming into his hands. Heron marked blade upright before him. The void leaped up inside him. For the first time, he barely noticed the tainted light of Saidin. How did we had this conversation last week, I think, but how did we come to the conclusion that this is in the world of dreams?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things going on that make me... One, Baalzamon showing up. That's, first of all, Baalzamon isn't in this portal world. He's just connected to Rand's dreams. Secondly, the fact that the mist comes up.
I'm nodding.
And then the fact that Rand burns and then is left with a single injury. His whole hand's aflame, but then he's left with a minor related injury, which happens frequently in the world of dreams. I mean, and the fact that Ishmael finds him by being ta'veren, over and over and over again, Ishmael is able to find Rand in his dreams, even when he can't find him physically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not, there's some evidence there, but it's also just repetition. Ishmael, Baalzamon isn't showing up and confronting him physically pretty much ever in these series, except at the very end. He's just invading his dreams.
For an instant, the eye holes of the mask glowed, as if fire stood behind them, rather than eyes, but Rand did not need to know who it was.
Advanced saw.
Baalzamon. And we get our typical long, psychotic speech from Ishmael. The one thing that I highlighted in the next couple of paragraphs is, "We are tied together as surely as two sides of the same coin."
I thought that was great foreshadowing.
Yeah. "Ordinary men may hide in the sweep of the pattern, but ta'veren stand out like beacon fires on a hill, and you stand out as if 10,000 shining arrows stood in the sky to point you out. You are mine, and ever in the reach of my hand."
Yeah. I stretch out my hand. I can touch you, Kinslayer. I can always touch you. Always and everywhere. That was a little bit earlier. But just, again, wherever Rand is, Ishmael is able to track him through the Ta'veren effects and reach out and touch him, even if he's in a portal world. You know, Ishmael wasn't there waiting for him. He just was able to track him.
And Lanfear. For one reason or another, Ishmael and Lanfear seem to be the two people who have this ability to track Ta'veren because of their effects on the pattern. I don't think we see anyone else doing it.
We assume that's how Lanfear found Rand in the beginning of this book.
Yeah.
She was able to track his Ta'veren effects.
Yeah, in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the Eye of the World being channeled all at once. You could have led her in the general direction.
Yeah, I suppose.
That's the only other thing I can think of that would point them that way.
Yeah, the raw power.
Ishmael's already on his trail, but we assume, we don't know this, but we assume that Lanfear was released right around the beginning of the Great Hunt.
Yes, but that's why I don't think
End
she was
of the Eye of the World.
I don't think she was out after at the very end of the Eye of the World.
Okay.
Because again, I think the only three that were out at the end of the Eye of the World were Agenor, Bethalmal, and Ishmael.
That makes the most sense because they were all closest to the edge, and we know that. And Lanfear, I mean, look at her. She's still
she has not
youthful.
Been ground by the mill wheel of time.
No.
She has been, although she is pretty fine. I wonder if she's been ground fine. Oh, thanks. I appreciate the pity laugh on that
one. No, I love dad jokes. It's cool. I was going through pictures because I do this all the time for social media stuff, just looking at fan art, and I really like the depictions of Selene and Lanfear, or Lanfear as Selene, I guess I should say. I think they're accurate. I think that it's done really well in a couple of these.
I mean, I don't think that she disguised herself in the slightest as Selene. I guess she is a little bit younger. She made herself look more like Rand's age.
A little bit more like she needs saving, I guess.
Yeah, and just to try and relate to him a little bit more. But when you're as old as she is, the difference between looking 25 and looking 20 is, well, they're both big lies.
Isn't she like 400 or something? Not including the time she's been, because she's obviously like 3,400.
Yes. And that's the way she wants to look, you know.
As Selene, you mean? Or
no, as Lanfear. She, even when she comes back as Saidin.
Sindane.
Yes.
That's the way I always said it.
Sindane. So when she comes back as Sindane, she still appears as Lanfear in the world of dreams. That's how she thinks of herself. That's how she looks.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, just as far as, appearing as how you think of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The way Perrin has two separate forms. And
sure.
Tel'aran'rhiod.
Right.
Sometimes he's a wolf and sometimes he's Perrin, but that's very much like Perrin.
The patron folks are saying that perhaps she's not actually that gorgeous, that she's using some compulsion or she's altered her form to look better, but I think she's just naturally that gorgeous. This goes hand in hand with Robert Jordan likes to make powerful channelers pretty. He likes to make the men tall and handsome and the women gorgeous.
Well, yeah, protagonists are always pretty in like every story.
I know, but I feel like there's some relationship between raw power and physical beauty.
Sure.
But I do like the idea that maybe she's doing something to people to make her beauty that much more stunning.
To make her even more intoxicating.
But I don't think, I think even the other Forsaken describe her as gorgeous, and I don't think she's doing anything to them to make them seem. But I could see where like she could be like doing a low-level compulsion on all the guys to be like basically a love spell. A little bit of love compulsion spell.
Sure.
Not something I thought about before.
You find odd followers, Belzamon mused. You always did. These two, the girl who tries to watch over you, a poor guardian and weak Kinslayer. If she had a lifetime to grow, she would never grow strong enough for you to hide behind.
And Rand thinks that's Moraine, but we know it's Egwene.
Yeah, I caught that. Because, geez, did we do this chapter yet? I can't remember if it's before or after this one.
Yeah.
It's before. Egwene pops in and sees Ishmael.
And startles him.
Yeah.
And because he's watching Rand, and Egwene pops in her dream.
That's how we came to the conclusion that Ishmael is watching Rand in the world of dreams.
Exactly.
Because Egwene sees him there.
Exactly. And she scares him off. So this is a reference to Ishmael having seen Egwene in the world of dreams. And he's saying if she had a lifetime to grow, she would never be strong enough for you to hide behind. It just made me a little sad. She definitely doesn't have a lifetime to grow. She's got about 2 years.
No, but she kicks everybody's ass in
Yep. She's still
a year and a half.
more than capable of protecting Rand in some places.
We're just about to talk about how she destroys Masana's mind.
Just breaks it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have two forces that are untouchable coming up against each other, and one of them shatters.
Yeah.
Imagine how badass she would be if she had a lifetime or multiple lifetimes. As a channeler, she could live 400 years and then join the kin and live another 400.
Sometimes old enemies fight so long that they become allies and never realize it. They think they strike at you, but they have become so closely linked. It is as if you guided the blow yourself. You don't guide me, Rand said. I deny you. I have 1,000 strings tied to you, Kinslayer, each one finer than silk and stronger than steel. Time has tied 1,000 cords between us. The battle we two have fought, do you remember any part of that? Do you have any glimmering that we have fought before? Battles without number? Back to the beginning of time? I liked that a little bit.
I think this is a bit of, again, a mix of truth, lies, and self-deception.
And we always see Ishmael doing this. I kind of skipped over it, but I also had highlighted, the Aes Sedai called Moraine told you who you are. Did she not? Did she lie? Or is she one of mine?
Yeah, he's trying to sort of mess with his head.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I want to talk a little bit about the darkness behind Baalzamon.
I was wondering if that was, an effect of naming the Dark One, or if it was just an effect of being in Tel'aran'rhiod and Ishmael can do that.
I think it's a shadow of the Dark One, kind of like the black cords are a connection between the Dark One and the various Forsaken.
Yeah.
I think what you have here is this blackness is the visible representation of Ishmael using the true power and his connection to the Dark One. And so when he names Shaitan, the darkness boils up behind him. It becomes this major, big, overwhelming presence. And then Rand denies the Dark One and the presence goes away.
Yeah. Perhaps that's also a reflection of being in Tel'aran'rhiod. With the utterance of that name, because Ishmael had said Shaitan, or however you pronounce that.
Shaitan, yeah.
The air seemed to thicken. The darkness behind Baalzamon swelled and grew, threatened to swallow everything. Rand felt it engulfing him, colder than ice and hotter than coals, both at the same time, blacker than death. And then, a few sentences later, I deny you, and I deny your power. I walk in the light. He blinked. Baalzamon still stood there, and the great darkness still hung behind him, but it was as if all the rest had been illusion.
I see that as he's denying the Dark One, and that darkness. Baalzamon is, of course, not the Dark One. He's just a Forsaken.
Yeah.
But he has the force of the Dark One behind him.
So, do you think that's a literal reflection of the force of the Dark One behind Baalzamon, or do you think it was illusion?
No, I mean, I think both. Like, it's a literal representation of the power, but you're only seeing it because you're in the world of dreams.
And Rand kind of flexes his will on Tel'aran'rhiod and dispels a bit of it.
Just I think in the world of dreams, things are visible that aren't normally.
Makes sense.
We see the black cords. We see the black representation.
Yeah.
There's just things about the Forsaken that are visible in the world of dreams that you can't see anywhere else. In the same way that prophecies, he has visions of the future in the world of dreams. He sees things in Tel'aran'rhiod of the pattern that you can't see anywhere else.
Yeah. Do we see the black cord anywhere other than Tel'aran'rhiod?
No. We see it on Asmodean, and we see it on Baalzamon. But those, I believe... And we see it on Balal? maybe?
I think that's right, yeah.
I want to say there's one other Forsaken that he's fighting. Yeah, he definitely doesn't see them every time.
That's something to keep our eyes out for to try to understand in the future.
But I don't think there's any doubt that this shadow is somehow a representation of the Dark One and his connection to Baal-Zaman.
And next is what we were talking about before. Do you want to see my face? It was a whisper. Rand swallowed. No. You should. Gloved hand went to the black mask. The mask came away. It was a man's face, horribly burned. Yet between the black-edged, red crevices crossing those features, the skin looked healthy and smooth. Look at me, Kinslayer, and see the 100th part of your own fate. This is what the power unchecked can do, even to me. But I heal, Theron. I know the path of greater power. It will burn you like a moth flying into a furnace.
I have to wonder if that effect is somehow an interaction between the true power and the one power. And that the fact that Ishmael is a vessel for the true power, but was exposed to the raw essence of the one power, somehow burned him in a way that couldn't be healed easily.
Maybe he was only able to partially protect himself with the true power.
Because you'd think, healing is pretty instant, and superficial burns, even deep burns, should be healable.
Yeah.
So I have to wonder, and he talks about...
Can you heal yourself with the true power? You can't heal
question.
yourself with the one power.
No, you can't. I don't know if you can heal yourself with the true power or not.
We see in the Eye of the World Loial do something, but I think it's with the one power.
But we don't see Loial in the Eye of the World.
Who am I thinking of? But, yeah, one of them. When Rand is battling with one of the Forsaken and he's like healing himself.
We see Agenor revert, his body's all worn out.
Yeah.
And he starts channeling the one power, the pure essence of the one power, and uses it to make himself younger and heal his body.
Yeah. Before Rand wrests it away from him.
And that just makes me think that the Eye of the World is a pool of pure power. It's not any of the 5 elements. It's something different. It's actually raw one power. Ishmael is trying to tempt Rand, basically saying, no one here can teach you how to channel the one power. I'm the only person who can do that. And if you don't pledge to the Dark One, to channel the one power, you're going to have to reach the taint, and that's going to drive you mad.
I noticed that he lies or bends the truth here when he says I'm the only one who can teach you how to channel and how to not destroy yourself, because clearly in the future Rand has Asmodean or Asmodean. Asmodean.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, but only by severing him from the dark side. So I think when Ishmael says I am the only one, he's basically saying me or my minions are you need my approval to be taught. And this is where he thinks he's the Dark One. A little bit.
Yeah. The power can be yours, and you can live forever. Forever. All you must do in return is serve. Rand licked his lips. Not to go mad. Not to die. Never. I walk in the light, he grated hoarsely, and you can never touch me. Touch you, Theron? Touch you? I can consume you. Taste it, and know as I knew. I have the rest of this highlighted on.
Well, I just want to say that this is Ishmael's goal is to turn Rand, not to kill him, because he very well could kill him pretty easily at this point.
Totally.
His goal is to
you could just kill him in his sleep. He would just never wake up.
Just mess with his mind. He's trying to get him to turn. That's the whole what he's pleading with here. Is he's saying, turn. With our powers combined, we can rule the empire.
Yeah.
Join me and we shall rule as father and son. Wait, no.
You underestimate the power of the dark side.
It's a little bit. This is definitely a Vader moment here for Ishmael.
Yeah.
Just come with me, join with me, and we can live forever and rule the
galaxy.
Yeah. No, that's not possible.
Those dark eyes became fire again, and that mouth, flame that blossomed and grew until it seemed brighter than a summer sun, grew, and suddenly Rand's sword glowed as if just drawn from the forge. He cried out as the hilt burned his hands, screamed and dropped the sword, and the fog caught fire, fire that leaped, fire that burned everything. Yelling, Rand beat at his clothes as they smoked and charred and fell in ashes, beat with his hands that blackened and shriveled as naked flesh cracked and peeled away in the flames. He screamed. Pain beat at the void inside him, and he tried to crawl deeper into the emptiness. The glow was there, the tainted light, just out of sight. Half mad, no longer caring what it was, he reached for Saidin, tried to wrap it around him, tried to hide in it, from the burning and the pain. And suddenly, as the fire began, it was gone. Rand stared wonderingly at his hand, sticking out of the red sleeve of his coat. There was not so much as a singe on the wool. I imagined it all? Frantically, he looked around. Baelzemon was gone. Heron shifted in his sleep. The sniffer and Loial were still only 2 mounds sticking up out of the low fog. I did imagine it. I don't know if you have anything you want to say, but I have, like I said, I have like the whole last page.
No, definitely. I want to say, that's his branding. He seizes the power and is immediately able to get out of the world of dreams. So I have to wonder, maybe,
So I think probably something happens there. Either Ishmael wanted him to embrace, seize Saidin, or Rand pulls himself out of Tel'aran'rhiod. I'm not sure.
It's also possible that
he does something with it.
He was pulled into Ishmael's dreams, and Ishmael was maintaining and keeping him there and pulling him in, and that may have been difficult across a portal world. And once Rand seized the power, he was able to break the connection.
Yeah, the description is interesting. I guess especially interesting because we know that Rand doesn't know what he's doing yet, so the description is not accurate. But what we do get is try to wrap it around him, try to hide in it.
He's protecting himself from whatever Ishmael's doing to him.
Yeah. Before relief had a chance to grow, pain stabbed in his right hand, and he turned it up to look. There, across the palm, was branded a heron, the heron from the hilt of his sword, angry and red, as neatly done as though it was drawn with an artist's skill.
And so the prophecy from the Corinthian cycle says, "Twice and twice shall he be marked, twice to live and twice to die. Once the heron to set his path, twice the heron to name his true. Once the dragon for remembrance lost, twice the dragon for the price he must pay."
So this is the heron that sets Rand's path.
Yeah. And we see this a lot in Tel'aran'rhiod, where Rand is injured, and it's this massive injury, and then he wakes up, and there's a relatively small reflection of it.
Yeah.
Like we see, isn't there a whole thing with the thorns where he gets stabbed a bunch of times and he wakes up and he's just got one thorn? So this is similar, where he's massive burns and he's left with just this little brand on his palm.
For a moment, it was like his clothes caught fire.
Yeah.
But
really, the only injury he actually got was the burning on his palm.
Which is interesting. Aradia's asking, and this is a good question, so how does the brand actually happen? It was a dream sword that burned him, but the dream fires don't? Or
things work a little bit different in Ishmael's dream shards than they do in Tel'aran'rhiod. Ishmael seems to have a little more control over how much damage he does.
Sure. And we know that Rand does something with Saidin, although he doesn't know what. It could be any number of things, because we know we're in Tel'aran'rhiod. We may be in one of Ishmael's dream shards.
Yeah, I think I want to make a distinction again between Tel'aran'rhiod, the generic dream world, and Ishmael's dream shards, which are separate and really under his control and work by rules that he determines, more so than the general rules of Tel'aran'rhiod.
So Rand may be, and this is total speculation, but Rand may be, awakened in the dream shard, and he's himself because he believes that he's himself. So he appears the way he thinks he should, which includes the sword that stays strapped to his side all the time. And he draws this sword, and Ishmael's just messing with him. Like we said before, if Ishmael wanted to kill him or blow his arm off or whatever he wants, he could do it. But he's trying to turn Rand, and so he kind of
he's scaring
gives him a little spanking here.
Yeah.
He's just showing him I can do whatever I want. This is your chance to not be obliterated,
and leaving him with just enough injury to be yeah, I can hurt you.
Yeah.
I can
he
really
says,
hurt you.
You really think you're going to do something with that sword? And he just makes it hot.
Yeah.
Is all that he does.
Yeah. He's basically burning the sword to show him that he is in control.
Yeah.
And of course, just talking about the various brandings, once the heron to set his path, that's obviously this heron. And that's setting his path towards
The horn?
the horn. Yeah, towards Falma and towards the second branding, which is twice the heron to name him true. So that's when he fights Ishmael and stabs him. He does that in the sky over Falma. And so that names him true because basically everyone gets to see the dragon fight the Dark One.
Right.
And so that names him as the dragon. Once the dragon for Remembrance Lost, well, if you're a clan chief and you go to Ruidion, you get a dragon on your arm for Remembrance Lost. Remember the origins of the Aiel. That's what the first dragon is for. Twice the dragon for the price he must pay is this dragon on his other arm. And the price he has to pay is the loss of a hand. And so that the dragon is branded on the hand that he ends up losing.
I just want to throw this out there. I had the thought as you were reading that, so Dragon 1, that all clan chiefs gets for Remembrance Lost. That makes sense. And Dragon 2, that marks him as the Dragon Reborn. And I thought maybe for a moment, like Blood on the Rocks of Shale Ghul, is that the price? Or is the price...
That could be. I honestly think the price is the loss of his hand.
I mean... It's a real price.
Yeah.
And it is interesting that he loses part of the dragon, not all of it. But
right.
Grendel blows it off.
Semrog blows it off, not Grendel.
Thank you, Aradia.
So there could be a couple of things, but I really like the idea of the price of the hand because it's marking the hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why we said Grendel. We know it's Semrog. I know it's Semrog.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole sequence in Tanchico, which is really interesting with the sad bracelets and just going back to trying to find those in the palace and how I'm listening to that book right now, book 4, and how early the removal of Rand's hand is set up and that confrontation is set up as Semrog is able to take control of Rand with the bracelet.
Doesn't Shaidar, I'm hesitating to even say this out loud. Doesn't Shaidar Haran punish her for that?
For wounding him?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think Moradin does.
Isn't Moradin?
Yeah, because Moradin is the one who's, at that point he's linked to him. So when the hand gets burned off, Moradin feels it. We see him like massaging his hand a couple of times after it gets burned off because he feels the pain.
Oh.
Of the hand being burned off. And so
point.
His whole thing is like, don't hurt Rand. That's an order. And she, basically tries to kill him. And Ishmael's pissed or Moradin's pissed because his fucking hand got burned off, basically.
Yeah.
It felt like it to him.
Or just burned very badly, perhaps.
Well, and that's, when you see Rand, he loses a hand and he shrugs it off like it's not even his hand. It's not. It's Moradin's hand. That's one of the reasons he's able to just brush it off so easily, is he's not really inhabiting his body anymore.
Yeah, he's in a really weird head space at that point.
Yeah.
Isn't his very first reaction like, I'll have to relearn how to use the sword?
Yep.
He's like, bummer.
Yeah, that'll be work.
It's going to take some practice. Right. Although, I mean, I guess at that point he's accepted that he's going to die. So losing a hand is like not the biggest deal in the face of imminent death.
And it's coming soon.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely like on the edge. He's negotiating with the Shan-Chan right before the last battle when that happens. So,
yeah.
Do you want to read us out?
Yeah. Fumbling a kerchief from his coat pocket, he wrapped it around his hand. The hand throbbed now. The void would help with that. But he was aware of pain in the void, but he did not feel it. But he put the thought out of his head. Twice now, unknowing, and once on purpose. He could not forget that. He had tried to channel the one power while he was in the void. It was with that Belzamon wanted to tempt him. It was with that Moraine and the Emerald Seat wanted him to do. He would not.
doing what I usually do, which is thanking the patrons.
Yeah, it's been a little bit.
It's been a minute.
We got a couple.
I think someone just pledged in the last few minutes.
Oh, cool.
Kevin Cassidy.
Thank you, Kevin Cassidy. We appreciate you, and everyone like you.
I checked about a minute or two before we started, and you hadn't pledged, so I must have just caught you. I wonder, are you trying to join the live show? If so, welcome. $5 by a guy named Matt Anzavino.
Thank you, Mr. Anzavino.
I know Matt pretty well. He was my college roommate.
Oh. I didn't know.
And a big fan of Wheel of Time, and I've spent many, many hours having these conversations with Matt before I had them with you. So,
whoa, cool.
Yeah, it was cool to see that name pop up. So, Matt, thanks, buddy.
Have you guys been talking, or did you just find the podcast randomly?
I sent him a message like a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Just being like, hey, I'm doing this podcast thing. So I don't know if he's kept up with it or if he just jumped on. And thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Matt.
Chuck Martin pledged. I think he pledged to jump onto Discord so he could hear us live. Thanks, Chuck.
Much appreciated. We're glad anyone cares to listen.
Yeah.
I say that all the time, but it still surprises me, kind of.
Sometimes. Well, and it's nice to see someone jump in to join the conversation and then realize that if they want to listen, they can give a little bit of money. And it's a nice incentive for us, and it sort of works the way we want it to, which is get people into the community and then offer a little bit more for those who can pay.
Yeah. That we drop a couple of public invitations and various social media like last week. I think that might have gotten some people to come check it out. Yeah,
it was nice. We got a bit of an influx of folks to join the Discord channel. It was pretty cool. Daniel Heald juiced his donation a little bit, gave it a little bit of a squeeze, so thank you for that.
Thanks for the juice, bro. It makes no sense.
The bra was
just going with it.
Nice. Pretty nice.
I say that ironically. I should probably stop. I think it's funny, and that's what matters.
Your hat doesn't have a curve in it. It needs to be flat if you're going to say bro. Your hat's got too much of a curve.
Or the backwards.
Yeah,
I should not make fun of people's hats. I wear baseball caps all the time, by the way.
$2 pledged by Ryan Hogue.
Thank you, Mr. Hogue.
Jana Tilton pledged, and I could have sworn I've seen that name before. So either she's coming back or...
Jana?
Yeah.
That does sound kind of familiar.
Jana
well,
Tilton.
In any case, thanks, Jana.
Thanks again. Daniel Carlson pledged.
Thank you, Daniel. Wow, this is a pretty long list this week.
Yeah, we had... Well, like I said, we put that Discord channel out, and we had a good number of people sort of find us through that and then decide to pledge because of it.
Well, that was a good idea.
Yes, it was. I think one of our patrons actually came up with it. They were like, I don't remember. I was working around something like trying to get someone into the patron channel, and I sent them the link, and I was like, oh, I could just send this to everybody. I'll do that. But yeah, that's it for this week. So thank you to the new folks who are joining us and the support, and of course to the people who have been here the whole time.
Yes.
And continue to support us. That's, we thank everyone who is pledging for the first time and upping their pledge, but the people who have been there since the beginning, who keep giving money month after month after month, who maintain their pledges, that is hugely appreciated.
Specifically the chosen, as we've taken to calling them.
I just like having them to participate.
The approximately a dozen to 20 people who are like always there and just hang out in the Discord channel, which is awesome. You just kind of log in and there's like always a conversation going.
I can't keep up with it anymore.
Even when I'm asleep, the Europeans are hanging out. It's cool.
I open it up and I'm like, oh, a few new messages, and I start scrolling and I'm like, I
can't keep up with
this. I can't keep up. There's a whole group of people who are having conversations independently of us, and that's really cool.
Which is totally awesome.
Nice to see something functioning without us. We've got like mods and
Aradia says we created a monster.
Something. Yeah.
A kind, mild-mannered monster.
A gentle giant, if you will.
Yeah.
A green man, perhaps.
An Ogier. I had no idea there was a Wheel of Time coloring book. Did you know there was a Wheel of Time coloring book?
Yeah, I did. I've seen that.
Aradia just linked to it. It's awesome.
I haven't...
Kind of want one.
Go for it.
I don't have, like, color pencils or anything.
My sense of color is terrible.
Yeah.
I end up coloring everything brown, like various shades of brown.
I took a test a long time ago, and I learned that my red spectrum is incomplete, I think.
Oh.
It was like sometimes shades of purple just appear to be blue to me. I never noticed. I mean, you wouldn't notice until someone points it out to you.
Right. I don't have that excuse. I can see the colors. I just have no... It's like someone who's tone deaf. Like, they can hear the music. They just can't sing it. I'm the same way with music. Or with colors, I mean. I can see the colors. I can appreciate them. But you want me to reproduce them? Not going to happen.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?